Alrighty. Alright, we want to greet everyone in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. We're grateful to the Lord for everyone that's here today. We're going to talk about a few things that the Lord laid on my heart to share, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about some other things as well. So when I was growing up, one of the first things I can remember, the first desire that I had, and most of us, we remember a desire that we just had, that something that we just wanted to have as a child. And my desire, the first thing that I can remember desiring is a go-kart. And I don't remember when was the first time I saw one, or if I even saw one in person. But I just had to have one. That was just one of those things that I wanted. And I can remember going to my next door neighbor's house, Mr. Frank Jones, who later on became a preacher. I went to his house, and he would get these big Sears catalogs that seemed like just as thick as Bibles. And this was, my dad was still living at the time as well. And this was, I would go to his house and I would turn through that catalog, and I can remember towards the back of the catalog was all the goodies, to me anyway. Towards the back of them. How many of you remember those catalogs, those big, thick Sears catalogs? And so I would turn to the back where the toys were. Now, I was already, I guess you could say, kind of spoiled, where I got what I wanted. I can remember, and when it was just me, I still remember that, when it was just me as a child, and having a big trash can full of toys, one of those big metal trash cans full of toys. And you can get to a place where, which is the way I raise my children, on those thoughts, you can buy them so much until it don't mean anything to them anymore, and so that's why I was very careful with my children. And so I had so many toys. I had the green machine. How many of y'all remember the green machine? That was the thing that you drove like this. It was green, I guess, which is why they called it the green machine. I had a play tractor. I had a play car, like the kind that you actually sat in or sat on. I had that's when those little motorized cars were coming out, where you had to charge the battery and you could press the gas on them and they would go and things like that. And so I had all of that. I had just about everything I wanted. And just to give you an idea of how I was, growing up, I can remember my dad and we were going somewhere, and we were in town, and I could just about take you to the exact place where we were. We were right on side of the park, what they call West Park, and I was sitting in the front seat with him, and we pulled up behind there was a stop light there, and we pulled up behind a trailer that was carrying a horse, and I told my dad that I wanted a horse. And one day I came home from school and I had a horse. You see, that's the way it was. Now, I didn't find out until I was grown that my daddy liked horses anyway. That before I was born, he had horses, he had stallions, and he would break those horses. And so that's the way it was. And so I saw this one thing. I wanted a go-kart. And I think it was because my daddy really loved cars. He really loved cars. And he just had all kind of vehicles parked in the yard there, and of course he drove trucks as well. When I say trucks, I mean like 18-wheelers, just for logging and things like that. In fact, I have a picture of my dad around the age of 18 or 19, standing by his first logging truck, you see. And so I grew up liking vehicles, and my dad liked them too. And when him and my mother got married, this was back when women didn't drive a whole lot. You know, most of the time, if they were married, especially, the men drove. And my mother, from what I understand, she was not interested in driving at all. And my dad wanted her to learn how to drive, but she just was not interested. So my dad, he went out and bought her a car and parked it in the front yard. I still remember it. It was a yellow car. Parked it in the front yard, and that was his way of trying to get her to learn how to drive. He bought her a car and just parked it there and told her, you can have these keys when you learn how to drive. And so she learned how to drive. That's what made her learn how to drive. He had bought her a car. And so I remember going by my next door neighbor's house, Mr. Frank Jones, like I said, who later on became a preacher. And I would go through that catalog, and I was just looking for one thing. I wanted to see the go-karts. And I think at that time they may have cost $100 or something like that, you know, if you could even imagine that now. And I would tell him, Mr. Jones, I'm going to get this go-kart. And Mr. Jones, who we later called Reverend Jones, he was one of the most calmest people that you'd ever meet. The best way I can describe him, he was like an Andy Griffith to me. If you remember the show, what was it? The Andy Griffith Show. He was just like that. He walked like the man, talked like him, even dragged his voice as he talked, you see. The closest thing, and even when he was out in the world, he was just the most calmest man. And I can just remember going to his house day after day and asking him for that Sears book. He would pull it out and give it to me. He'd sit right there on the couch with me, and I'd be turning through it until I could get to it, and then I'd tell him, Mr. Jones, I'm going to get me a go-kart. He said, oh, really? And he'd converse with me about that go-kart. And by the way, Mr. Jones, later on in life, he became a minister not long after that, when I was still growing up. And I can remember that, since we're talking about him just briefly, I remember one day in church after he had became a preacher, he stood up in front of the people. And he had been working at his job, I think, at that time for about 20 years, and had went up the ranks as they go up. And I can remember him saying that the job and the position that he was working required for him to work on Sunday, which meant he would have had to miss church. And he said, so the only way to avoid that was for me to start all over. So he had to go back to the position that he worked when he first started there. So basically erasing 20 years of his hard work there and going back to the same pay as well, you see. And I always admired him for that. I've never forgot that about him, that, you know, he stood up. If he didn't give that testimony for anybody else, he gave it for me, you see that. The fact that he was willing to be downgraded so much, you know, after all of those years of hard work, for the Lord's sake, he was willing to go backwards, and he was willing to start over, you see that. And that always painted a picture for me, and I understand now why that always stuck with me. So he was one of the calmest men that you'd ever meet. And so I wanted a go-kart, and I was told a story that my dad had actually took me to the store. I guess I may have been 4, to buy me a go-kart, and people had started calling my mother, going out to the payphone, calling my mother, telling my mother that my dad had me walking around the store with a $100 bill. And I guess they thought it was dangerous. So so my mother got on him about that. Don't have my son walking around with that kind of money, you know, just out in the open. Like, to me, $100 didn't mean anything to me. You know, I didn't know what the value of the dollar was at that time. To me, it might as well have been $1. But my mother objected to me getting a go-kart. And I wanted one so bad, and some of you may remember me telling this story. I wanted a go-kart so bad, I would dream about it. I would dream that I was driving a go-kart just through my yard. And I remember, you know, in the dream, knowing this is a dream. My mother would be in the dream while I was driving the go-kart. My mother would call me. And, of course, at that time, when Mama called, you came to see what she wanted. You didn't wait till you got done with whatever you wanted to do. But I was so aware that it was a dream, not because I am like the way I am today, you know, where the Lord dealt with me, but because it was just so unbelievable, it had to be a dream. So my mindset was, well, I'm going to just keep riding this go-kart. This is a dream anyway. If she come whipping me, it's not going to hurt. So, you know, I'm going to just keep riding and having fun while I'm asleep, you know. That was my mindset. So I wanted the go-kart, and my mother objected, and my dad just went along with that. And so he, at that time, young people, children were building their go-karts, especially if they couldn't afford them. And some of you may remember that, where they would get a flat piece of plywood, and they would get some old toy that had wheels underneath it, and if the toy was broken, they would take those wheels and put wheels on the front and the back, and some of them were even high-tech to where they would put 2x4s under the front wheel and have it with a single little axle there where you could turn it, and you would see people going down the road, going down a hill with a rope turning, being able to turn a go-kart. We used to race that way. And so my dad, he had drove through the neighborhood looking for some children that had built their own go-kart, and he had asked them if they wanted to sell theirs, and they didn't want to do that. And so there was this man, that one of the people that worked for my dad, he got him to build the go-kart for me. And I could remember sitting on the edge of the porch, just very, very impatient, wanting him to finish that go-kart. And so, it was just one of those things I just had to have. Now, some of you may know that I had, just a couple of years ago, maybe a little bit, about a year and a half ago, I bought my first go-kart. I didn't buy it for me. I've never rode it. I just figured, well, the children would have fun on it, so that's why I bought it. But I bought it from a lady who had it for sale, and she was telling me that for whatever reason it just would not start. She said it was working maybe a week or two ago. We were able to start it, but now we're not able to start it. So we couldn't figure out what was going on. I went ahead and just gave her the money for it. And I figured whatever it was, then it might be a simple fix. And so I took the go-kart and bought it from her. And then I took it to this mechanic, a guy that normally fixed some things for me. And he called me, I guess, a few days later, because I gave him a few other things to fix. And he said, "I got your go-kart running." And I said, "Oh, yeah," because it didn't cost that much money, and I just figured, well, whatever it costs to get it running, it would be worth it, And I know that this guy, he did good work on things like that. And so he said, "Yeah, I got your go-kart running." I said, "Yeah." I said, "How did you do that?" He said, "Well, when you come pick it up, I'll show you what the problem was." So then I went there to get the go-kart, and we loaded it in the back of the truck, and after we loaded it, he came out with this little deal here. Now this, some of you can see, it's got two wires coming out of it, and it's got a switch on the top of it that you can flip. And what this is called, it's called a kill switch. And what it does is, after you, of course, the go-kart, it's a manual start. You have to pull the rope for it to start. But how do you cut it off? You see that? So the way you cut it off is you hook this kill switch into it, and it basically kills the electrical circuit that's in it and shuts the engine off. And so he was telling me the reason why the go-kart was not working. Now, everything else on the go-kart was fine. Everything worked the way it was supposed to. I think he replaced the chain for me and things like that. But as far as the engine, everything, it worked just fine. But he said that your kill switch is bad. And I said, "Oh, so did we need to get another one? Did you put another one on it?" He said, "No." He said, I just took it out altogether. He said, "It really don't need a kill switch. You really just don't need a kill switch." He said, so let me tell you what a kill switch does. What you do is you take one wire and you put it, hook it up to the electrical circuit part of the engine, whatever type it may be, and then you take the other wire and you hook it to the frame of the engine. Now I drew a diagram to help you to understand this a little bit better here. And so after you hook that up to the frame, for it to be on, there has to be a break in the circuit where it's just, when you pull the rope, it's going to cut on. But what turns it off is when you flip the switch to off, it's basically connecting the circuit on the inside of this little box here, and it grounds the circuit, the motor, killing it, turning it off. And so he said basically what happened was that it just I guess, resorted to ground, to an automatic ground where no matter how you flip the switch, it was going to always be grounded. So basically, the motor would appear to be bad and something would appear to be gravely wrong because you couldn't start it. But the only problem was this little piece here that you can go to the store and buy for a couple of dollars. Now, you would think that was odd there, that this little piece right here. And see, and so an untrained mechanic, me, I would have been checking everything else. I'd have been checking spark plugs. I'd have been checking points. I'd have been checking the carburetor. Maybe we need to get the carburetor need to be rebuilt. You can go all over the place with the motors on why it won't start. But the thing about this kill switch too is most of the time it's hidden. Is in a place where you're not looking for it. I didn't even know the go-kart had a kill switch on it. You see. So I'd have been looking everywhere else but this here. That kill switch. Just something this small here going bad and it could stop a whole engine. And you can connect this, by the way, you can connect something like this to your regular vehicle. No matter how big it is, you can connect it to it. It'll kill that engine just like it'll kill a little small lawnmower engine. No matter how big the engine is, you just hook it up to the right circuit, it'll kill it. You see that? So if you have your Bibles, let's go real quick to the 12th chapter of the book of Hebrews. We're going to start reading at the 11th chapter of the book of Hebrews. We'll start reading at verse 37. Now this is what they call the wall of faith, the chapter where it lists all of these great men and women of God that did great and mighty exploits, from Abraham to Isaac to Noah to Jacob, Joseph, the parents of Moses, Joshua and Rahab, all of these people, all of the great things that they did and how God used them. So what the writer of Hebrews is doing is he's summing up some of their lives to give you an idea that if God is going to use us in a mighty way, we have to walk by faith the same way that these people did. We have to be willing to go against some of the things that we see naturally. We have to be willing to move out from our comfort zone as these people were able to move out from their comfort zone. And so we're going to start reading at verse 37. And it says, they were stoned. They were stoned. They were sawn asunder. Now, can you imagine? I've tried to picture that. How somebody, and the legend is, and the story is that even Jeremiah himself was sawn asunder. Meaning somebody strapped him to a table somewhere and took a saw and began to saw his body while he was alive. You see that? Now, if you could imagine that's the whole idea, to inflict as much pain as they could. So it says they were stoned. If you can imagine that as well. I think sometimes we've read so many times over somebody getting stoned that we don't think about what all that entails. As somebody taking rocks, big rocks, and just hitting you in your head and all over your body until you just die. If you can, you imagine the torture there. You see that somebody actually just throwing big boulders of rocks at your head until you leave here. One of the things that they did as well is they buried people from the neck down so that only their head was above ground. You see that? So you couldn't block anything. They would just, sometimes they just stoned you, just threw rocks. They were just so tired of you. But if they really wanted to punish you and execute you and take their time doing it, they would dig a big hole and you'd stand in it, and then they'd cover you up with dirt. And so all you got on the outside of the ground is your head, and they would just stand right over you and just throw stones on top of your head until you left here. You see that? So these are talking about people who they volunteered for that when they decided to live for the Lord and go beyond, the norm. And so if you're going to stand out for God, if you're going to be a standout for him, if God sees you, trust me when I tell you, the devil sees you too. You see that? And you have to be willing to suffer persecution just like you're willing to suffer, willing to allow God to promote you and willing to allow God to help you in your spiritual walk with him. So it says, these were stoned, they were sawn asunder, were tempted, were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, and tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. You see that? Now that always stood out to me, that the writer of Hebrews tells us that the world was not even worthy of these people. The world, he was saying that the world didn't even deserve that these people, the world didn't even deserve these people. That they were so far above things that the world didn't deserve them. That just, their life was so valuable and so precious. It says, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and in mountains and in dens and caves of the earth. And these all, having obtained a good report through faith, received not the promise. Everybody see that? So all of these things that these men were doing, it wasn't on this side of the cross where Jesus Christ had already came. Now we have proof that Jesus Christ actually lived. You can even find proof of his death, burial, resurrection. There's proof of that. There's proof. You can't deny it. And anybody that want to deny it, just ask them, what year are we living in? And you say 2017. Well, why do we say 2017? Because the whole system of time is based on the life of Jesus Christ. You see that? Before Christ and after his ascension into heaven. You see, our whole time-based system is based on his life. That's amazing to me. You'll ask an atheist what year it is. They can't tell you other than going by Jesus Christ. And God said it that way. You see that? And so it says, and these all having obtained a good report through faith, received not the promise. So they are willing to do all of this for something that was coming in the future, even beyond their lifetime. Now, if you can imagine that. Now, most of us, we can say, yeah, Jesus Christ, he came, but I ain't willing to go through nothing. These people were saying, no, he ain't came yet. We just got something saying that he's going to come, and so we're willing to suffer for his coming in the future. You see the difference there? They were rejoicing and living a life as if the Lord had already came. You see, with us, it's, well, he done came, but I ain't willing to go through all that. Persecution being talked about, and that's mostly what we have to worry about. Most of our lives aren't in danger about anything. You see. And these people were not only willing to give up sin, they were willing to give up their very lives. Now, if we today can't give up sin, it would make us think we'll be willing to give up our life for the Lord, our natural life, when we're spending most of our time trying to save it, you see. So it's a difference there, you see that. And that's the reason why he named that. So it says, and these all having obtained a good report through faith, received not the promise, God having provided some better thing for us, that they without us should not be made perfect. Everybody see that? So he's saying that what we have today is better than what all of these people that he named, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Sarah, all of these people, Rahab, we have something better than they have. All they had was hope and faith towards the future. Now we're looking back and know that it has already taken place, the thing that they were looking forward to. That's the reason why Jesus told his disciples, many prophets and great men before you, they longed to see this day that you're seeing and couldn't see it. You see that? He was trying to get them to see, you ought to feel blessed that you are able to see what God is doing today. Instead of, going by the word some kind of way and thinking, well, God will send his son in the future at some point, You see that? These people also, they knew that they could not go to heaven until Jesus Christ came. Everybody understand? They couldn't go to heaven until the Lord came. That's why they were all prisoners until the Lord came. They were in what you'd call Abraham's bosom or paradise. They had to hear the gospel the same way we have to hear it. That's the reason why Jesus Christ went down into the belly of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. What was he doing? He was preaching to souls, not to those that had already rejected him beforehand. He was preaching to those that were waiting for his promise. That's the reason why after Jesus Christ was crucified and they took his body and buried it, what does the Bible say happened? That many dead people that had been dead for years, began to walk the streets of Jerusalem. Why? Because he had preached to them already, and they were being resurrected. And they testified. Now, could you imagine seeing somebody that had been dead for years, somebody that you knew, your uncle, your mama, your daddy, seeing them walking around testifying of the glory of God and then being taken up into heaven? That was a great event. That's the reason why history got to respect and bow down to Jesus Christ. You're not going to get around that. You see that? And so they were rejoicing because the chains had been loosened. He went down there and he took the keys to hell and death. And so that made him in charge of it then. You see that? And so the reason why we have something more perfect and better than what they have is because everything is already past. The promises of God, those things have already been fulfilled. Healing have already been provided. You see that? Those people, I'm sure they shone at the fact that we are able to live in this day and age where the Lord have already gave his back to be whipped for our sins and for our sicknesses and our diseases, and we won't take advantage of it. It took more faith on their part to receive healing because Jesus hadn't come and gave his back yet. He hadn't received stripes yet. But on this side, he's received stripes, and the Bible says we were healed. In other words, it's already done. It's just up to us to receive it, you see. And so to understand what we're going to get into in chapter 12, we had to read what the writer was talking about. Now, you have to remember that in the book of in the Bible, when these men wrote these epistles and things like that, they weren't divided in chapters. They were just straight letters. They didn't even have, and another thing you need to know, they also didn't have quotation marks. They didn't have periods or anything like that. No commas, nothing like that. You see that? They didn't have any of that. So you kind of just have to read it like that sometimes to get an understanding of what's being said. And so in chapter 12, verse 1, it says, "Wherefore, seeing we are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses." Everybody see that? What cloud of witnesses? The people that he just went over in chapter 11. Those are your cloud of witnesses. Please do not accept that lie that when people leave here, they just dead somewhere. They have no conscience at all. They just somewhere waiting on the Lord to come back before he wake up their conscience. When people leave here, all death is your spirit leaving your body. That's it. But spirits don't die. Souls, you still have your mind. You're aware of who you are and what you were when you were in this earth. So he names all of these people in chapter 11, and then he says, "This is why, seeing that we are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses." What witnesses? The people that have already gone on before us. What does he say? "Let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us." You know that word beset, it means to aggravate, it means to torment, it means to slow down, it means to hinder in any way possible. Now you think the thing about besetting is different. It could be different for everybody. Now me, I can get a cold. I'm good as long as I don't get a fever. And my wife, and especially women in general, it seems like they can just work through everything, anything. They can just push through. You see that? That ain't me. That ain't my grace. The only way I do that is for the Lord's sake. You know, some of you may remember those 2 or 3 weeks I had pneumonia and I was doing the daily devotion. I was getting up doing daily devotion and going right back to bed. Let's see. So it's different things that beset different people. You know, some people, they may have a high tolerance for pain or discomfort in one area, but in another area they can't stand it. They can stand getting hit in the head with a hammer, but can't stand a paper cut. You see. So it's different things for different people. So look at what he says there. Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight. Everybody see that? We have to lay that aside. Now, you may ask, what is a weight? Now, you think about, I'll tell you. A weight doesn't, every sin is a weight, but not every weight is a sin. The weight is designed to slow you down, whether it's sin or not. It may be something, let me just make this clear. It's not a sin to watch TV. Depending on what you're watching, I'll put it that way. Let me put that out there. But it could be a way you can even be watching Christian programs. Good Christian programs where the word of God is really being preached. But that can be a weight to you if it's taken away from your prayer time. If it's taken away from you spending time with God. Everybody understand? So every sin is a weight, but not every weight is a sin. It just depends on how it's affecting you, you see. There was some years ago, after I moved to Louisiana, I gave up my job in Oklahoma and I moved to Louisiana, and I thought that was the end of it. I gave up my job just like the Lord told me to, but I didn't know that he didn't want me picking up another job. And so I had a dream that I was going down this highway. I got a call that there was some trouble at the church, and I was going down this highway that I would have to take to get to the church I was pastoring at the time, and I was pushing a shopping buggy, and there was nothing in it. And I looked to the right, and there was like trash piles, just like people put trash out on the street, and there were trash piles out there on the street. And as I'm going down this highway, I see a TV sitting there on the trash pile. And I went over there and I picked the TV up and started carrying it. And I walked, I think it was 3 steps, I think. And I just noticed, so when I picked the TV up, it started working. Now, this was something that was on the trash pile. I picked the TV up and I started walking with it. And I could only take like 3 steps before I had to put it down because it was so heavy. I had that dream, I think it was in June or July of 2005. In December of 2005, I had in November rather, I applied for a job working at a TV station. And so in December, I went in for the interview. And the lady that was interviewing me, she wasn't living for the Lord. I knew that. And she asked me, what do? I said, well, I pastor a church. And she said, well, you know, you're going to get hired. We're going to hire you. She said, but don't you think that this would get in the way of what you're supposed to do at the church if you're pastoring it? I said, no, ma'am, I can do it. I did it before. You know, I've been pastoring. I can work a job and pastor at the same time. She said, okay. So I got hired, went into work, and I felt very, very, very grieved. Very grieved. Like I was like, you know, sometimes you could do something and you don't know what it is, but you just know I've done something, and I just, you know, it's something wrong that's not sitting right with you. You know, really what it is the Spirit of God trying to let you know you done made a wrong turn somewhere, you done something off, you know, somewhere. And so I had worked, I think, one day at that job, May have been 2 days. And I called because what happened was it was a Tuesday night. In fact, it was my birthday, December 6th. And I left the TV station on my way home. It was about an hour drive, and I was going to. I left that Tuesday, and I had to be at church for Bible study at 7:00, and I had to get there to preach. And so on the way there, I was praying, and I just had an idea. I said, "Well, Lord, if this feeling that I'm getting is from you, and you don't want me to work a secular job, then you let something happen to this vehicle." And whatever it is that you do, don't let it be something that I can't fix. I don't want to be putting it in the shop. Just do something very simple. And so that's what he did. I had a whole hour to drive. I got 1 block away from the church. 1 block. When I stopped at the stop sign, a block away, I saw my temperature gauge go over to hot. And I just only had a block to drive, so I went on ahead and drove that block, parked it, went inside and preached, came outside. The deacon and I, we looked under the hood, and we discovered that the serpentine belt had come off of the front. It's connecting the air conditioner and the main pulley and all of that. And we put the serpentine belt back on, and it worked good after that. Now, I know that was the Lord. From that day, December 6, 2005, I hadn't picked up that weight since. That's what the Lord was showing me in that dream, that secular job was a weight, and I wasn't going to be able to carry it. It was going to be too heavy when it comes to doing what God wants me to do. You see that? So what it was, I was on my way to church in that dream to take care of some business that had come up, and on the way there, I had picked up the TV, which was the job that I had. I could only walk a couple of steps with it before I had to put it down. You see that? That was the Lord showing me the days that I would work there. And that's once he did that for me, it ain't no devil on this side of hell and on the other side either that could tell me what the will of God is concerning that. I know that there are people that still got a problem with it, but it's just their problem. You see that? But it was a weight. It was something that the Lord wanted me to put down. Why? Because it was going to affect my ability to do what it was God wanted me to do. That's what that weight is. Even the tricky thing about weights, it doesn't have to be naturally so. It could be something that's tormenting your mind. In other words, you can be doing something and you can feel like, well, I could do this and still be saved. But the devil ain't going to let it happen. He's going to torment you with it. You're going to be tormented. You're going to know it's something on the inside of you that's telling you, if you really want to get close to God, you're going to have to give this up. That's why the Bible says, now you look at how he says that. Let us lay aside every weight. You see that? Whose responsibility is that? And then he says, and what? The sin. Everybody see that? Now, most of us, we had it. But I'm glad that the writer wrote it like this. I'm glad that God put it in there like that. Let us lay aside every weight and the sin. Most of us, we had the sin. And we know what the sin was for us. And may still be for us. That one thing that Lord, if I could just give this up, I can go before your throne of grace and I could pray heaven down. If you'll just, that's the sin. That's the sin right there. The sin that got you approaching God sideways like a crab because you know you ain't right. And as long as you got the sin in your life, I don't feel right. So it says, and this sin which does so easily beset us. In other words, easily gets us off the path. Torments us. See that? And let us run with patience the race that is set before us. So the idea is this. There's an arena. You have to think about what the writer is talking about. The cloud of witnesses the people in the stands. Now that's the way you have to. Most of you know what track look like, track and field. You ran track or played football or something like that, and you go into the game and you see all of these people sitting in the stands, and then you see the people out on the field, on the track, doing whatever it is that they're doing concerning whatever sport you've gone to see. The idea is that our cloud of witnesses are these people, great men and women of faith that have gone on before us. According to what we just read here, they're watching us. We're compassed about with these witnesses. It ain't just you in your home with your doors locked, and it's just you that know what's going on. You got witnesses. Now, if you know that, it might help you not to do what you're doing behind closed doors. You see. And so we call this message the kill switch, because the kill switch is the weight, the sin. So let me show you this diagram. I just drew it back there just right before I came out. So here was the diagram here for some of you that want to see. I tried to do the best I could. So this is like the lawnmower engine here, or the go-kart engine. Then you have the ground or the frame. That's basically what the other side of the kill switch is hooked to. Is hooked to the frame. In other words, the frame represents your flesh. The kill switch represents sin or weight. Everybody see? Sin is the off button. Weight is just the idea of it being there. It just, in other words, it may be a weight for you to watch TV. It's not a weight for somebody else, because it's not ingrained in them to just sit in front of a TV for 5 or 6 hours a day. They can watch 30 minutes or 20 minutes and just get on up and go on about their business. Some of us, it's a weight because we sit down and we watch something, then we get to flipping channels or going through, whatever box we may have, trying to look for something else that's good, just to be entertained. Then the motor, of course, it represents the Holy Spirit and the way that He leads us. So this works all the time. There's nothing wrong with this. But in between this and our flesh, the ground is the kill switch. Now this right here should not affect this. And the only reason why this flesh affects the move of the Holy Spirit is you got things in between it that kills it. Everybody see? The issue is not that God just absolutely hates the weight. No more than, you're a man or a woman, maybe married or in a relationship. If you got any sense, if your spouse or better half or whoever cheats on you, you're not mad at the person they're cheating on you with. You're not in a relationship with them. Some of us, we take our anger out on that other person, you see. They're not the issue. It's something else that's the issue. And so with God, God does not hate television. He hates that you allow it to come in between you and Him. Everybody understand? God ain't... I'm sure He hates some of the things that's on it, but I'm just talking about G-rated TV. That's what we're talking about. So anything in your life, it could be anything that you put before God. He hates the fact that it's disturbing and interrupting where He wants you to go. You know, people that run races, you ever see how they run races? They're almost naked. Now that's one of the reasons why I don't watch that. I'm not interested in watching beach volleyball, none of that. And now the devil, I'm gonna tell you now, that's a trick of the devil. You think, oh, I really like volleyball. The devil thinking, but you got to watch half-naked people to watch it. You see? But part of the reason why, now again I'll say, you may have a reason for doing something, but you have to ask, what's the devil reason, you see? But the natural reason why people don't wear many clothes, when they're running, they wear shorts and something light up top and things like that, is because they don't want, number one, to be hot, because since they're moving or whatever it is they're doing, especially in a race, they don't want their temperature to get in the way, their body temperature to get too hot. Another reason is because of the weight. Believe it or not, all of that weighs in when you're racing, especially swimming. You try going swimming in some warm-ups, you're going to be drowning somebody. You get too far out there. You can feel it. Now, you may think you start off, you run the first lap or two, you think, oh, this is fine, ain't nothing wrong. You be out there for a little while. After a while, you can just about name how much weight your clothes is on you. You see that? You can just about tell it starts weighing on you. And that's the way it is. The idea is you don't want to be slowed down. The devil's got weight out there for the purpose of slowing you down. You may run the race, and I'm going to tell you that. You start off in your Christian walk. You start off running as fast as you can. After a while, that weight will catch up with you. Everybody understand? After a while, those things will slow you down, and eventually you will get tired and you will come to a dead standstill. And that's the way it is spiritually. You'll only run with that weight so long before it wears you down. And you'll only get so close to God before that weight wear you down. You'll know it'll be something on the inside of you that will let you know, if you want to get closer to me, you're going to have to give this up altogether. And it's not because God is picky, and it's not because he's just, he don't like you, whatever the case. It's because he's holy. And he cannot become unholy for our sakes. He's holy. So holy that there aren't many people that can approach him. In fact, it's clear none of us can approach him in flesh. Now that's how holy he is. None of us can approach him in flesh. We drop dead in his presence if he ever decided to show up in his full glory. You see that? Now that's some power there. Well, all you got to do is show up. No gun, no knife, nothing. Just show up, and folks get to dropping dead. And you get a picture of that in the Old Testament when the high priest every year would go in to offer sacrifices into the Holy of Holies, the very center of the temple where God himself was, his glory was. And they would have to tie a rope around his ankle, because if he went in there in the Holy of Holies and he himself was not holy and was not consecrated unto God the way he was supposed to be, he would drop dead. So they had people, as he would walk in, they'd be holding the rope. Now to me, I'd give up that job. Especially back then, because back then it wasn't based on faith as much as it was, did you offer up all of the cows and turtle doves that you were supposed to offer up? So they would be at the door waiting, listening. Everybody be quiet so we can hear Reverend John drop dead. Now that's some church to have, isn't it? And if he dropped dead, they heard a thud, they would just start pulling on the rope and pull his dead body out of there and consecrate another priest to go in his place. You see, so God didn't back down. You even see when they were in the wilderness with Moses, how God had pretty much turned his back on them, where they would have to stand way off, and God would come down and talk with Moses and Aaron and Miriam, and they would be way off just outside of the tents just looking, because they weren't holy enough. They didn't want to live right. And so God was just dealing with them three. And he couldn't come around them anymore, because of the way that they were. And they would have to stand way off and view that. You know why? A kill switch. Something that you see what happened when I got the go-kart fixed. The man just took it out altogether. I'm glad he did that. Why put another one in and run the risk of it going bad? You see what I mean? Let's find another way to kill the engine. You see, in other words, naturally. So there's got to be another way just to, why even put it there? And so the thing spiritually that God wants you to see is, why even have a kill switch in there? Don't play with it. In other words, if you know that it can go bad, then don't even put it in. There have been many people over the years that have sent me emails, that have called me, have done all these things, however they choose to do it, asking me, Brother Bolden, do you think it's a sin for me to do this? It is to you. That's always my answer. It is to you. You know why? Because for you to ask me that, your conscience is wearing in on you. Your conscience is what convicts you. Now let me prove that by the Bible. In the Old Testament, it was against God's law. It was against their tradition for anybody to eat the showbread but the priests. But David went there and ate some, and he wasn't anybody's priest. He didn't drop dead. They were supposed to drop dead when they ate of that showbread. David didn't. You see that? You know why? Because he superseded law. He walked by faith. Everybody understand? Now that's the whole revelation of it. He superseded law. When the Lord came in, he was breaking all kind of Sabbaths. That was the reason why he brought that up. You see that? What did he say? The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. My life isn't going to be based on whether or not I'm going to heal somebody on the wrong day. Y'all not going to kill me for that. Especially if, when you yourselves break it, because if one of your animals fall into a ditch, you're going to go pull them out and go get some of your friends to help you with it. You see. So when we got something that's just eating our conscience up, let's deal with it. Let's not just keep moving down and just hoping one day, that our conscience is soothed about it. If you got something that's eating you up, because I'm going to tell you something about weight. You find out, and I'm speaking from experience now, you find out that as you carry weight, you may try to reason in your mind about it. Well, it's not a sin. It ain't in the Bible. It ain't a sin. But you know what weight does? It leads you to sin. You're gonna have to start sinning to keep up with it. And then you find out, okay, so you see, so that's what that weight is. That's the reason why God don't want you carrying it. Children, it's not a weight. It may not be a sin for you to watch TV. Your mom and daddy may not want you watching TV, or they may not want you watching certain programs, most of you. And you may think, well, I don't understand why. I got all these restrictions. I can't wait till I get grown. Until you have to pay a cable bill, you see. But I'm going to tell you what makes it a sin. When you start despising your parents for them guarding your soul, because they know what's on the other side there. That's where the sin come in at. When you start getting up and sneaking to do certain things. No, it's not a way to be on. It's not a sin to be online. It could be a weight to you. Your parents know you. You see that? So it becomes a sin when you start sneaking on there. You see how you justified it at the front door. At the front door, it ain't nothing wrong. This house is good. But it's not good when you got to sneak in. That's where the sin is. You got to be deceptive about it. Now you're sinning to carry the weight. You see that? I'm going to tell you something. We talked about sincerity last week. And you know, and really it boils around integrity. If you got to sneak to do it, you know it's not right. If you can't do it out in the open, it ain't right. You know that. Now, if you got any kind of Holy Ghost, that's a miserable life to live. Because you know you ain't sneaking around him. You see that? So it's not God's will for us to carry those weights. Let's get that kill switch out of our lives. Let's not play with it. Because I'm going to tell you, you find out the hard way. You keep playing with weight, it's going to turn into something. And it's going to be ugly. It's always ugly. You see that? And then you find out, oh, this is why I shouldn't have been. This is why God, I felt bad about this. You know, and you know what we do when God starts dealing with us and our conscience about what it is that he wants us to give up, we justify, oh, it's not a sin. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't see it in the Bible anywhere. The Bible don't say this. And you keep playing with it, and all of a sudden you get caught in it. And you find yourself in something that you wish you hadn't got a hold of. Because now you got sin, you got all kind of strongholds. You see that? All that, children, I'm talking to you now. All that sneaking around that you have to do things that's going to follow you. Right now it's the internet, TV, whatever you're sneaking around to defy your parents with. But all that sneaking around, you know what it leads to? A lying spirit. You'll get to the place where nobody can trust you. And you know what comes with a lying spirit? You won't be able to trust anybody either. Everybody's suspect. You see that? Well, what did that start with? You sneaking around. That's generally, and it's not always the case, but that's generally the case when you got that jealous spouse always accusing the other spouse of cheating. You see that? You do that from your own conscience. Your conscience convicting you about what you're doing, and so you open the floodgates up for and accuse everybody else. That one that's afraid of their spouse leaving them is because you've played with that. Everybody understand? You played with it. Whatever you're walking in fear about, it's because you've opened up the door for it. You've played with it in your life. You see that? And that's what that weight will do for you. It start off as weight, it ends up ugly. It ends up sin. And it's really to taint your walk with the Lord. It's to get you not to trust in people. It's to get you to become bitter. That's what will ultimately lead to. When you got to be sneaky to do things, then you don't trust anybody else. You know, you thinking that people are like you. So that's not the Lord's will. All right, so now we'll open it up for questions. If anyone have any questions. Yes, sir.
So when you're talking about weight, like different, for TV, for example, you're saying like some people can't.
Oh, here, you need to talk on that.
Okay. So,
yes,
okay. So the question I have is that you asked, or you said about like TV, like some people can't, some people just can't control themselves, whatever things they're like being weighted down by. So, is it possible that it can be a weight to you at one point in your life, and then at another point in your life it's not a weight to you because your mind's renewed about it, or is that not possible?
It could be possible that it could be a weight at one time, and then as you grow in the Lord, you know. But now I will say this: you'll have to grow, and that's not for everything. You understand? That's not me personally. I feel like this is always my stand on it, just to be safe. If God told me to give up something at one point, that's for the rest of my life. I don't care how before I grow in the Lord, I'm not going to even play with it. You see, if even if you grow beyond the point where you feel like, oh, it's not going to bother me, it's not going to be that big of a deal, why open the door for the devil to come back in? You might be strong enough to tomorrow about it, but the next day, the day after that, it could come right back on you. So, so my thing is, if God have dealt with you about it one day, then to me that's forever. Don't pick it up anymore. Don't, if it's a weight to you like that, don't even give the devil room. You see, and so and let me just say this since we're here, that's my stand even about wine. The Bible says drink a little wine for your stomach's sake. Now you have to keep that now for whose sake? Not to get tipsy. Not because you're going through something and it just makes you feel good. That's what the Holy Spirit is for, see? Not that spirit, the Holy Spirit. And the devil, he shows you in plain sight what it is on just about every liquor store. What does it say? Wine and what? And there ain't nothing holy in there, you see. So, but the thing about it is, why play with it? We can't say that it's a sin to drink wine. But then you have to think about your motive about it. Why play with it? If you know that it is something that overtakes people, that causes them to even lose their ability to even be themselves. I'm going to tell you, that's, to me, that's just something I can't stand. It just bothers me to see a drunk person, a person that's not themselves, to know that they're one way, naturally so, but when they take on those spirits there, they're just completely different person. So I say just stay away from it. Now I'm going to tell you, if you living for the Lord, you're not looking for an excuse and looking for ways out to do certain things that you want to do. You see that when you are sold out to Him, you're focused on Him, and you're not trying to bring everything with you that you can, and then God's got to wrestle with you in this journey to get you to give up certain things. You just gonna want to serve Him so much until whatever, Lord. You'll get to the point where God don't have to come and give you a list. You know your list. You know where you're wrong at, and you ain't cringing, hoping that God don't bring this. So that's what I say. Does that answer your question? All right. Do we have any other questions?
So you were saying about the spouse that basically has distrust or issues with trust because they may have played with that at a point in their life. But what's another example of how it could affect your spouse when you're taking on those things? Basically picking up something that God told you to not pick up, or to put down a long time ago.
So now ask me that again now.
So when you're talking about this spouse who's basically has trust issues with the other spouse because they were playing with that in the past, how else is another reason, or how else is another way that can affect your spouse when you're picking up those things that God told you to put down?
So how does it affect your spouse?
Yeah, can it affect your spouse?
When they pick up something, so when one spouse pick up something that God have told them to put down, how can it affect the other spouse? Well, I guess the only thing I can think of is that it can affect, to me, when people are married, if one person in that marriage is not on one accord with the Lord, then it will affect that marriage. Automatically, when you got two people that are married and they are walking in the same direction towards God, but one of them gets slowed down with weight, what's the only way? So let's say, for instance, just natural, so you're carrying weight and that spouse is carrying weight, whatever it may be, and of course they're slowing down. That means they're walking at a slower pace than the other spouse. What does that other spouse have to do? Everybody see? No, they don't have to slow down. So what does God want them to do? Let me put it that way. Huh? Hold them up. No, he don't want you. If my wife, I'm going to just tell you about me. If my wife was walking with weights, I'm not going to help her carry it. I'm going to tell her put it down or we're going to part ways. Everybody understand? I'm not going to allow our marriage is just going to have to suffer. And you're going to have to feel the sting of it until you get, when you see me way off in the distance, you're going to put something down. Now, I'll be praying for you. You see? And so it affects a marriage. You see that? Especially now, I say that because that's God's will. 90% of the time, that's not what takes place. Most of the time, I'm going to slow down with you. I'm going to try to help you. I love you enough to carry it with you. No, and then that doesn't qualify for bear ye one another's burdens. That weight, the Bible makes it clear. You put that down. You see that? A burden don't have to be something that affects your walk with the Lord. But a weight, it affects your walk with the Lord. And if you got one spouse that, I remember when my wife and I, when we first got married, we'd have some big fights, knockout, just bad fights, constantly arguing. We'd be yelling. And I don't know about my wife, but I walk outside of the house feeling ashamed, thinking, I hope the neighbors didn't hear. How many of you ever did that? Lord, I'm still saved. Going to the store at night so nobody don't see you. And so finally one day, my wife and I think we got into it, and I told her one of us got to be saved. In other words, we can't both be acting a fool now, So that's the Lord's will. You see that? I believe we're to help our spouse, but we're to help them spiritually. You see that? God wants us to see where our spouse is spiritually more than he wants us to see whatever is afflicting them naturally. All right, does that answer your question? All right, do we have any other questions?
I have a comment.
Mm-hmm.
So about the weights, one thing that kept me held down in the past was when I would watch certain testimonies or different things like religious things of like testimonies or some kind of way someone being used by God and things like that. It would hold me back because I would then begin to put my trust in those things instead of allowing God to work in my life personally. And it would be a thing where then my prayer time would suffer and my me spending time in the Lord would suffer. And so I asked the question about having your mind renewed because I feel like I grown to a certain place where I'm not constantly searching for those things, but I had taken that back up again, and I noticed that I could where I could resist. I know there was temptation, but I could resist it because I would say like I grew in a certain place, like just beyond from what I was like seeking it just over and over and over by myself. But so like I took it back up that, like watching testimonies and just certain things, but and I felt the temptation to try and make me like be consumed with it, and I could resist it. But like how you said, like why would I want to put myself in a position like that anyways, to be tempted and over and have that overtake me and stuff. But really, it was like it was already overtaking me anyways, because I'm already being tempted by it. So,
Yeah.
So that's how the message spoke to my life personally. Like, just the Lord had already spoken to me in a dream. Like, it was going to be negative for me, but I was thinking like, but my mind's different about it now. So, like, that's how it spoke to me, to just let it go for good.
I had a comment. So I know like you guys have heard me talk about Facebook a lot and how that affected me. So like I gave that up for a while and I wasn't on it for, I don't know how long it was, but it felt like a long time. And then like recently, like I started going back on it again just to look at like recipes, but then it was always scrolling down and looking at things in people's lives and just like being so consumed with it and things like that. And so I noticed that I started like making excuses for it in my mind, and I would say like a lot of those things like there's nothing wrong with this though, and this is not a sin to do this, and I would even think like like crazy things like, well, my brothers and sisters in Christ have like a Facebook and Brother Bolden has a Facebook, so I know it's not bad for me to have a Facebook. But I would get really, really consumed with it to where I was scrolling on it for hours, and especially at work, when I'm waiting in between calls, like I had Facebook in another browser, so I would be searching on it between every single call, and then by that time, like at the end of the day, I pretty much, if you summed up all the time I spent on Facebook, it was a couple of hours like put together. And then I noticed when I would come home, I just felt like so distracted, and it was hard for me to read the Word and to really get into it. Like it felt so hard to get into the Word and spend time with the Lord and stuff like that. So that's also how the message spoke to me in my life, because I realized that I was making excuses for Facebook again.
All right, so anyone else want to speak about how the message spoke to them? There you go.
For me, it made me think about something that happened to me just this morning. So when I was in like, I guess probably a senior in high school or something, I got the top of my ear pierced, and I still have the hole, like it's still open. And so this morning I was pulling out some earrings out of my organizer, and I was like, oh, I haven't worn an earring up here in a long time. So I just put it in. I was listening to one of the messages while I was getting dressed, and I kept feeling this urge to just like take that out. But I just ignored it. I was like, and it kept coming to me, take that out, take that out. I was like, okay. So after like the third time, I was like, it was just something that I couldn't shake. And when I took it out, the Lord was like, you did that when you were in the world. Like, that's not something you should be doing. Not necessarily that it's bad for, I guess, everybody across the board, but for you, since that was something that you did when you were doing things that were ungodly, that's not something that you should even feel comfortable doing, especially going into the house of the Lord with that. And so I was like, okay, that's it for me. I ain't gonna never try this again.
Yeah, so does everybody understand now? We're talking about weight. There's, one weight for one person may not be a weight for another. So everybody know what it is for them, And look at what that says there. Lay aside every weight. You see that? So it may not be one thing. You see that? It may not be one thing. All right, anyone else want to share about how the message spoke to them? Pass her this mic, give her that mic. Mm-hmm.
And I'm just glad that you went in detail on what it was because I didn't really understand what the weight was.
Mm-hmm.
And that, and then also realizing that it's a choice to put those things down. Like you don't have to be bound by weight or sin. And then I also was blessed about hearing about the witnesses, about how they didn't have to see Jesus Christ in order to live by faith. They just like they did it without seeing him. And it just has me thinking about like how I took it for granted, like knowing that Jesus Christ came and me still trying to do things my own way. So I was just really blessed by that, just seeing how they just had to have more faith in Jesus Christ.
All right. Anyone else want to share?
Okay, what I wanted to say was sometimes it's like relationships. I've had some relationships where, in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, this is not working out. Or, sometimes it wasn't even like it's not working out. Sometimes it would be like, it's cool, but in the back of my mind, I know something is not right. So that's really all I want to say. Sometimes it's just relationships as well.
Mm-hmm. So when you say relationships, you're talking about like boyfriend girlfriend relationships, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I think that's a big one for all of us. I think most of us that have been a weight, because anything or any person outside of the one that the Lord has for us is going to be a weight, and it won't end well. You see that? The only way it can even last is if we lose our place in the Lord ourselves. You see that? It's kind of what I was explaining earlier about, how our first instinct as a spouse or as, a mate or whatever is to help our, significant other carry the weight. That's usually our first instinct. But God's will is for us to keep moving, and our relationship with God don't need to be hindered because of who we are with, you see. And so I think that's a big one has been a big one for most of us. Just being in situations that we shouldn't be in. You see that? Especially if we haven't been taught that the Lord has somebody specifically in mind for us, if we are willing to give ourselves over to Him completely in that manner. All right. Do we have any other anyone else want to share?
You gave I guess kind of like laid it out how sneaking around opens the door for a lying spirit, and then that opens the door for mistrust, where people are not trusting you, and you're not able to trust people. And I guess it just reminded me of what the Lord had to deliver me from, and I've never connected that before, but the Lord let me see that, in my life as I looked at my past, and how at a time when I was supposed to be living for the Lord some years back, and I had inquired of the Lord about a relationship, and the Lord told me no, and I reasoned in my mind and went forward with it, and then began sneaking around doing things. And I can see how, and I've shared this with some people, how, the scripture talks about the Lord sending you a delusional spirit. And I saw that happen in my life because of me rejecting the Lord and rejecting what the Lord had told me, and trying to reason what the Lord had told me about being in that relationship. And I saw that play out in my life. And just seeing, I guess, knowing the fullness of it, basically. It wasn't just maybe being dishonest in a situation that can open that up, but just sneaking around that, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be words that you're speaking to be dishonest. It can be you sneaking around and trying to hide something that opens the door. And so I was just, I guess it just reminded me of what I went through then and how the Lord had to really deliver me from that and take that from me.
Yeah. All right.
I want to say kind of go back to what Brother Garcia was saying about picking something back up, because we were sitting here talking and I came up. Like I have this game on my phone that I had once before that I got rid of because it was taking up too much of my time. And then kind of like what he was saying, I felt like, well, now I can play it and I know, okay, well, now I need to put this down now and spend whatever time I need to spend with the Lord. But as we were sitting here, I was kind of trying to justify, but I'm like, well, the fact that the game even popped up in my head, when it's probably something that I need to go ahead and take off my phone. And then also what you were saying, I think you said, like we'll be thinking about something and telling ourselves like that's not a sin, but the devil will torture us with it. That kind of brings me back to the whole movie situation. I don't know if y'all remember Brother Bolden sharing that, but I had sat and talked to him about why my mind was where it was concerning that, and he has I guess cleared some stuff up for me, but I had still been feeling kind of uneasy about it. So first I had to repent while I was sitting here. I think the Lord doesn't want me watching particular movies for whatever reason, so that's something that I'm just gonna have to give up and go back to, even though I better understand what he explained to me concerning it, but still for me it's something that I have to lay aside. And then I also just want to share a quick testimony, because I think it was it Wednesday that you prayed for me? Wednesday I had asked Brother Bolden to just pray for my body in general, and then for specifically for certain parts of my body, because I still having pains and stuff. And so after that, I've just noticed a big difference. Thursday and Friday, especially after work, I noticed a big difference because if you see me after work, then you understand this when I say I was actually able to walk after work with no pains or anything. So praise God for that.
All right. Somebody, is there a mic back there? Passing the mic.
Yeah, I just want to share. I think back, when I stopped drinking alcohol. I remember in the beginning of that, deliverance, I tried to support, using the word, in a sense I don't see in the Bible where it says that you cannot drink, don't get drunk. And I tried to use that, to justify, even though I'm saying I can still drink a little bit, just don't get drunk. Until I came across the scriptures that talk about, walking in love and not being a stumbling block, for those who have a weaker conscience. And, in that time, I was still, trying to sneak my way into the liquor store. Hopefully nobody will see me going in or out. But that can become a week when you're sneaking around and you have knowledge and you know that you need to do better. And for you to not do better after you come to that knowledge is a sin. I can tell you, personally, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
Trying to sneak around and hoping you don't get caught. So, I thank God I came to the point where I was like, you know what, just leave the alcohol alone totally. So I thank God, for the word and the truth and, deliverance.
Mm-hmm.
The word really blessed me as usual.
Amen. All right. You said you had something else? Oh.
So my question is, I have a question about, is it possible for, like, will the devil try to use what weight you have to bring to someone else?
Yeah, he can try that. But you know whether or not, it's up to every individual. They know whether or not they have, they have an issue with whatever, if that make any sense. You know, I'm gonna tell you how you know it's a weight when you've been brought under the power of it. Everybody know what that means when you brought under the power of something? You can't just give it up. When you got to make excuses for it, it's because your flesh has a hard time giving it up. Now, concerning that question concerning weight, one person's weight being somebody else's weight, it's possible, and I've seen preachers do that. The Lord might deal with them about a certain thing, or not just preachers, but just people in general. The Lord might deal with them about a certain weight that they may have or may have had, and they try to make that a sin for everybody. I've seen people do it with television and things like that. That's not God's way. Now, where love comes in at is, if I know that God has dealt with you about a certain thing, I don't want to be a stumbling block to you. Everybody understand? You don't, and we as believers, we walk in love towards people. So we don't want, we love them, so we don't want to use our liberty and cause our liberty cause somebody else to stumble. Everybody understand? So if you know that somebody have had an issue with a certain thing, or God have dealt with them about it, then don't be doing that in front of them. You see that? Don't do that in front of them. And so, did that answer your question? All right. Do we have anything else? Anyone want to share?
I have another comment. So when you were talking about the leading to the trust issues because of what you're doing behind God's back, and well, not really, he sees everything, but like what you're doing when you're sneaking things, like when I was talking about the Facebook things, like my husband at one point, I think he had told me to not be on Facebook. And then I took it as, I was like, oh, well, he said it for that day, but I kept on doing it. And when he said to not be on Facebook anymore, like, I mean, I should have just took it as that's it. And plus, I was just making excuses for it. But when you were talking about the trust issues, there's thoughts that have been coming to me, like, I think within this past week, about having trust issues towards my husband. And I was just telling my husband this morning that I just don't understand, because that hasn't been a thing like since we first dated. Like that hasn't been coming to me ever. Like I never had problems with that. So I can definitely see how when you're sneaking around with things like that, like how it affects your relationship with people, relationship with the Lord and things like that. So that really opened my eyes and answered a big question for me. And then I think I have another part to that. Oh yeah, and then I had a question, like when you're talking about like the sin that does so easily beset us, like can you, like taking up that sin and that weight, like can that lead to other weights and other sins that you can take up?
Yeah, that's the nature of sin. That is the nature of it. It's a virus. It's a cancer that spreads throughout. So it's deception to think that we can have this sin and it won't affect us. Because the thing about it, there was an old song that used to be sung, letting down the bars. You let down the bars, you let down the bars, you compromise with sin. You let down the bars, the sheep got out, but how did the goat get in? How did they get in? How did the goats get in? You let down the bars. In other words, when sin is in our lives after salvation, is because we've opened the door for it. So let's say, for instance, standing on the outside of this door here is the sin of lying. And we just open the door. Lying is knocking at the door. Let me in. We open the door. We let it in. And we think with our natural minds, I'm going to close the door. This is the only thing I'm going to do right here. I got to lie. No. Because I don't want to hurt nobody's feelings. You know, I mean, we even make excuses for lying. You know, don't not see. So with me, don't ask me anything unless you want to hear the truth about it. You see. But the problem with sin is that once you let one of them in, you see, you ain't got to keep the door open. That one is going to open the door. Everybody understand? That's an old saying from that. What does it say? Scratch a lie, find a thief. The old people used to say when I was young, if you lie, you'll steal. You see what I mean? So what is the devil doing? Giving you ammunition for other things. Everybody see that? Just like adultery, you know, fornication or whatever. Somebody committing adultery, they're not doing it out in the open. You got to have a lying spirit to be committing adultery. You see? So what I'm saying is people just don't wake up one morning and they just find themselves in this big old deep ditch. You have to dig that ditch. Your first shovelful might be deception. I'm just going with it. They don't need to know all the information. I'm going to withhold some of it. You know, see. That second shovel is just flat out lying. You see that? The third shovelful is adultery. You see, so it's like you every time you do something, you compromise somewhere, you open up the door for something else. And I know that because one time the Lord had showed me to go pray for a man that was deaf and dumb. And showed me a vision of me praying for the man, and when I prayed for the man, he wasn't healed. And I asked the Lord why he wasn't healed, and the Lord, now these were his words, because you have to cast out that nicotine spirit first. Why? Because as long as he's dealing with that, it can open the door for that spirit. Now that was for him. You see that? That was for him. And so sin is it likes to have playmates. Whatever it is. It likes to have playmates. It's not one person that's just dealing with one sin. You're deceived if you think that. You see, all of them. If you're doing one of them, you're ready for all of them. You see that? Don't think for 1 minute you can play with sin. You see that? All right. Do we have any other comments? Or anyone else want to share something how the Lord have dealt with them? All right.
Well, as you were talking, it kind of reminded me of the testimony I gave back in September about wearing pants and how I had no idea, like how much weight that carried in my relationship with the Lord, and just being able to see, like, from that time to today, how allowing the Lord to renew my mind in that, and just being obedient even when I didn't really fully understand it at the time. As time went on, I can definitely look back and see now just how much of a hindrance it was, and how I would not have been able to grow and go to the place that the Lord wants me to be in if I had reasoned in my mind or been willing to compromise when I knew the Lord was telling me that was something that I needed to put down. Like, in between that time and this, the Lord has been able to just speak to me in a more direct way, for lack of a better way to describe it. Like, I think I was sharing this with the Garcias not too long ago, how like I felt like there was such a disconnect between me and the Lord, and I couldn't figure out why. Like I would pray and I would read my Bible and stuff, but I still felt like even though I was going before the Lord, it was still like I felt like I was going through the motions and trying to force a connection that wasn't there, and I didn't understand why it wasn't there. And then when the Lord brought that back to me, that was something that I needed to give up. After that, He began to like open up more things to me about what the hindrances were that stemmed from me wearing pants and just having that blockage there that was such a huge weight that I couldn't get beyond it without putting it down. And I guess I'm just saying that to say, like, if the Lord has told you to put something down and you reason with it long enough, you'll reason yourself right outside of God's will and then be wondering why you don't have the same zeal, you don't have the same love and the same fire that you once had to read your word or to pray, and you'll just be going through the motion, doing vain repetitions over and over, trying to appear like you still living a righteous life, but you've gotten out of the way.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I wanted to go off of what she said. I'm sorry. Okay. So when she was talking about the pants thing, that really helped me too. To get rid of a lot of things in my life, I saw it just things started falling off of me after, like, I got rid of my pants and things, and it was hard at first. But also, I want to say for me, it was more makeup and things like that, because I was really into makeup. Like, I would watch videos. I remember I felt like I was so bound to it, but my husband, when we lived in our apartment in Arizona, like, we had completely opposite schedules. So whenever he was at work, I was at home, and whenever he was at home, I was at work. So I wanted to spend time with the Lord, and I wanted to grow and stuff like that, but whenever I would get home, like, I would literally watch on YouTube makeup and even hair tutorials and things like that, but it was mainly makeup tutorials all day long, and I couldn't put it down. I was so bound by it, and I'm saying, when I say all day long, that was about 8 or 9 hours that my husband was gone, and that's the only thing I would do. And then also, I noticed, like, sometimes I look back on my phone at my old pictures and things like that, and like, I was just looking at it yesterday, and I have a bunch of pictures of, like, of me when I was wearing makeup and stuff, and I would pose a certain way in the camera, and, like, I would spend hours and hours, I think it was around maybe like 1.5 hours doing my makeup, and then about an hour doing my hair. So I would spend like 3 hours almost getting ready, and that was about like 2 years ago. But like, I really cared so much about the way I looked, and I would find myself looking in mirrors all the time, and I was like, I wanted mirrors everywhere. I wanted mirrors in our apartment everywhere. I wanted mirrors. I told Louie at one point, when we get a house, like, I want mirrors everywhere. And I'm just looking at the danger of that, because, I mean, that's what made Satan fall from out of heaven, is because of his pride, and he looked at himself. And, like, it just was, I didn't realize how dangerous it was until, I gave it up, and then I started noticing I would hardly ever look in the mirror unless it's just to straighten my hair or something like that, and I would spend about maybe, I want to say like 15 minutes getting ready instead of 3 hours now. So, like, I just feel like I'm totally free, and I really don't care at all about what I look like anymore, as far as, I mean, I want to still be hygienic, but I don't really care about, like, those things anymore, because when I would leave the house without makeup, I would feel so ashamed, and I feel so, like, naked, and I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't want to be recognized by anyone, and I remember telling my parents, like, I don't want to go anywhere because I already took off my makeup, and sometimes I would sleep with it on because I was so self-conscious about myself. but I just want to share that testimony and stuff because I know I've been delivered from it because I don't feel like that at all anymore.
Amen.
Amen.
All right. Anyone else want to share? All right. If that's all, we want to remind everyone to continue to lift the Evans family in your prayer. Continue to pray for them during the set time that you've set aside to fast and pray on their behalf. We want to say thank you all again for being here today. And I just want to mention, my wife and I, we got to talk with a couple from South Africa last night over Skype. They're a young couple, young to us anyway, but they consider themselves to be a part of the ministry, and we were just talking with them. I believe the man, he has a calling on his life, and hopefully we're talking about starting a branch of the ministry there in South Africa, and so we look forward to that. He was telling us last night his wife was already looking up tickets to come fly here just to meet us and to be in the service here with us. And so, but we had already done the same thing as well and looked up tickets to see what it would cost to fly there to help them with starting the ministry there. And so you all be praying about that as well, that the Lord's will be done in that, and pray for their family as well. And also want to ask you to pray for the pastor over in Portland, who has a branch of this ministry here. From here, he has it there as well. There it's called In Spirit and In Truth Ministries, and he was the brother that had called and wanted to link up with this ministry and basically come under it and be mentored and things like that. So hopefully before this year's out, we'll be flying up there to meet them and to fellowship with them as well. And so you all just keep them in your prayers, and keep this ministry in your prayers and the people in it as well. All right, if that's all now, we'll go ahead and dismiss you in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ.